The palace banquets of the Daye Dynasty had always been the grandest dream in the capital. Inside Zichen Hall, golden censers warmed with fragrant incense, jade nectar shimmered with light. I sat beside my husband, Vice Minister of Personnel Xiao Wenyuan, gently pouring him a cup of grape wine tributed from the western regions. The warmth from my fingertips seeped through the cold jade pot, carrying just the right hint of tenderness. Husband, His Majesty seems to be in quite high spirits today. I reminded him in a low voice, gesturing for him to look at the Emperor Yi Zhao on the dragon throne. Xiao Wenyuan slightly raised his eyes, the corner of his lips curving into a warm and refined smile, the look I once was most captivated by. He nodded gently, his voice pressed extremely low. His Majesty wishes to implement new policies at court and needs the full support of noble families like ours. Today's banquet is both to appease and to warn. I nodded, knowingly, and placed a piece of deboned perch into his dish. After 3 years of marriage, I had long grown accustomed to concealing all my edge. I am the legitimate daughter of the military Luo family, trained in martial arts since childhood, skilled in archery and horsemanship. But Xiao Wenyuan disliked women wielding swords and spears. He said his wife should be gentle and virtuous, a refined lady who could keep him company while he read by candlelight and cook for him with her own hands. For these words of his, I sealed away my sword and hid my bow. Wholeheartedly being the woman behind him, managing the household for him, showing filial piety to his parents, and even after his elder brother, the former heir Xiao Wenjing of the Duke of Dingguo's manor, passed away, I attentively cared for his grief-stricken widowed sister-in-law Zhou Wangqing. I thought he saw all my devotion and kept it in his heart. I thought behind this mutual respect as guests, there was always some genuine affection hidden. After several rounds of wine, the singing and dancing were in full swing, and the night outside the hall was so thick it couldn't dissolve. Yet the candlelight inside the hall was bright as daylight. Suddenly, a shrill sound of something piercing through the air shattered this peace, as several dark shadows descended like ghosts from the hall's beams, cold glints flashing in their hands. Their target pointed directly at a white-haired censor, not far from the dragon throne assassins. Someone screamed hoarsely, and the entire Zichen Hall instantly fell into utter chaos, screaming, tables and chairs toppling over. Jin Wuwei's furious roars intertwined with it all. I instinctively stood up, shielding Xiao Wenyuan behind me, my gaze vigilantly scanning the surroundings. My body was faster than my thoughts. The instincts from years of martial arts training had awakened. In the chaos, a stray arrow shot from somewhere, whistling with death, came straight toward us. The arrow's target was Xiao Wenyuan and the deathly pale Zhou Wangqing beside him. My pupils contracted sharply, and I was about to pull out the golden hairpin from my head to deflect that fatal strike. But at that very instant, Xiao Wenyuan beside me moved. He didn't dodge, nor did he shield his frail and helpless widowed sister-in-law. Instead, he did something I will never forget for as long as I live. He grabbed my arm, that hand which had held a brush countless times to paint and draw my eyebrows, now clamped onto me like a cold iron vice with irresistible force. He shoved me forward violently, using my body to form a solid human shield for himself and Zhou Wangqing. Time seemed to stretch at that moment. I could clearly see the calm and resolve in his eyes without the slightest hesitation. His cold voice, like ice laced with poison, pierced precisely into my eardrums, crushing my last shred of illusion. "Ningxuang, you know martial arts. You won't die. Sister-in-law is frail. She can't be frightened." He said it so matter-of-factly, as if this were the most profitable deal one could make. The next moment, searing pain tore through my left shoulder. That feathered arrow, carrying unstoppable force, embedded itself deep into my flesh. I could feel warm blood instantly soaking through my luxurious palace gown. My consciousness drained away along with that warmth. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the freezing cold in my heart. So my knowing martial arts had become the reason I must die. So in his heart, my life was worth less than sparing his widowed sister-in-law a little fright. I staggered back a step, looking at him in disbelief. He didn't even glance at me. All his attention was focused on Zhou Wanqing, who was trembling beside him. He held her tightly in his arms, comforting her gently. "Wanqing, don't be afraid. I'm here." How laughable. The one protecting her was clearly my blood, my life. The surrounding clamor seemed to fade away from me. The sounds of the Jinwu guards fighting the assassins, the cries of the palace maids, all became a blurred background. In my world, only Xiao Wenyuan's face remained, so close yet so out of reach, along with his words that cut deeper than any blade. I opened my mouth, wanting to ask him why, but what surged up my throat was a mouthful of sweet, metallic blood. My vision began to blur, and the brilliant lights in the hall dissolved into swaying halos before my eyes. In the last moment before I collapsed, I saw that the Jinwu guards had taken control of the situation. All the assassins had been killed. The emperor, Yi Zhao's furious voice echoed through the hall, and my husband, Xiao Wenyuan, was receiving looks of sympathy and admiration from everyone for his merit in protecting his sister-in-law. So the most laughable thing in this world isn't giving everything for love, but when you take a fatal blow for him, he is being praised by the world for protecting another woman. Darkness swallowed me like a tide. In the last second before my consciousness faded, only one thought remained in my mind. Xiao Wenyuan, if there is a next life, no. If I ever get a chance to do it over, I, Luo Ningxuang, will sever all ties with you and won't rest until one of us is dead. I thought I would die. Drifting in endless darkness and tearing agony, I seemed to return to the military camp at the border from my childhood. Father punished me by making me hold a horse stance under the scorching sun. Sweat blurred my vision, every inch of my body screaming to give up, with only that unyielding will supporting me. But this time, even that will seem to grow faint. When the heart dies, the body seems to lose its will to survive too. I don't know how long passed before a sliver of light pierced through the heavy darkness. I struggled to open my eyes, and what came into view was a bright yellow gauze canopy embroidered with 9 dragon patterns. A large luminous pearl hung from the top of the canopy, emitting a soft yet cold glow. The air was filled with the extremely rare scent of ambergris mixed with a faint herbal fragrance. This was not the Duke of Dingguo's mansion, much less my bedroom. I struggled to sit up, and a piercing pain immediately shot through my left shoulder, making me gasp involuntarily. "Miss, you're awake." A familiar voice choked with tears sounded beside my ear. I turned my head and saw my personal maid Baiji kneeling by the bed, her eyes swollen like 2 walnuts, her face covered in tear stains. "Baiji," my voice was dry and hoarse, as if it wasn't my own. "Miss, you're finally awake." "You've been unconscious for 10 days, this servant thought. Baiji sobbed uncontrollably, clutching my hand as scalding tears dripped onto the back of my hand. Unconscious for 3 days. The bloody scene at the palace banquet flashed through my mind instantly. Xiao Wenyuan's cold face and his heart-piercing words. My heart clenched suddenly, and that suffocating pain struck again, even worse than the sword wound on my shoulder. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and forced myself to calm down. Crying and resentment are the most useless things in this world. My father had taught me this since I was young. "Where is this place?" I spoke again. My voice was much steadier, reporting to Miss. This is the Changle Hall in the palace. "After you were struck by the arrow, His Majesty was furious and immediately summoned all the imperial physicians to treat you, saying he must save the daughter of the Luo family's meritorious minister." Baiji wiped her tears and answered cautiously in the palace. A hint of doubt arose in my heart. Even though I am the daughter of a military family, with my father holding the position of Minister of War, I shouldn't be honored enough to live in Changle Hall, a residence only for the principal consorts of the inner palace. There must be something suspicious about this. Just as I was pondering, a slight commotion came from outside the hall. A eunuch's shrill voice rang out. "His Majesty has a decree. Luo Ningshang received the decree." Beiji's face turned pale with fright. She hurriedly helped me out of bed. Enduring the intense pain, I barely managed to kneel on the ground with her support, head bowed listening to the wind, yet my heart was filled with icy, deathly stillness. An imperial decree, a decree at this time. Is it to commend my selfless act, or to appease my Luo family so this matter can be quietly settled? A grand eunuch dressed in crimson official robes, holding an imperial scroll, slowly walked into the hall. Several lesser eunuchs followed behind him. Quite the grand procession. He cleared his throat, and that distinctive, slightly effeminate voice rang out, especially clear in the quiet hall. By the mandate of heaven, the emperor proclaims, the second young master of Duke Dingguo's manor, Xiao Wenyuan, during the assassination attempt at the state banquet, remained calm in the face of danger and risked his life to protect his sister-in-law. His sentiment is worthy of sympathy, his intention worthy of praise. Moved by his filial and brotherly heart, I specially grant him permission to marry his elder brother's widow, Lady Zhou Wangxing, as husband and wife to comfort his brother's spirit in heaven. An auspicious day shall be chosen for the wedding, so it is decreed. The first paragraph of the imperial edict was like a resounding slap, striking hard across my face. I knelt on the ground, my whole body stiff. I could almost hear the sound of my blood freezing. Sacrificing herself to protect her sister-in-law, deeply devoted and righteous, what a tremendous joke. The reputation he earned by trading my life for it has now been personally stamped and certified by the current emperor, the highest authority of the Daye Dynasty. My sacrifice, my suffering, the price I paid when I nearly lost my life all became fuel for the deep as the sea love story between him and his beloved. I bit down hard on my lower lip, the rust-like taste of blood spreading in my mouth, yet I didn't cry, didn't even show a trace of expression. Nothing is more sorrowful than a heart that has died. When a person is completely disappointed in another, even hatred seems superfluous. However, just when I thought this was the ultimate humiliation, I never expected the real thunderbolt was yet to come. The head eunuch paused, glanced at me, his eyes carrying a hint of indescribable pity as he continued reading. The Luo clan's Ning Shuang, daughter of a military household, a tiger's daughter of commendable loyalty and courage, stepped forward in times of peril, her merits benefiting the nation. However, her fate with the Xiao clan has come to an end, and we are deeply moved. Unable to bear seeing her drift alone hereafter, subject to gossip. Our imperial uncle, Prince Jing Yijin, has rendered meritorious service to the world, guarding the northern frontier, yet remains unmarried to this day, truly a pillar of our great nation. We have pondered this matter repeatedly. We believe the Luo clan's resilience is worthy of Prince Jing's prestige. By this decree, we bestow this marriage, betrothing Luo Ningxuang to Prince Jing Yijin as his principal consort. 3 days hence, the Imperial Household Department shall arrange for her relocation to Prince Jing's residence. May the two live in harmony like zither and harp, jointly guarding the realm, so it is decreed. Boom. My mind went completely blank, filled with deathly silence. Even Baiji's breathing seemed to vanish. Everyone had been struck senseless by this inconceivable imperial decree. Prince Jing, Yijin, who was that? He was the current emperor, Yi Zhao's only blood uncle, a figure even more legendary than the emperor himself. He rose to fame in his youth, single-handedly quelling the rebellion of the 8 kings in the northern territories, hailed as the undefeated war god of the great Yi Dynasty. Rumor had it he was decisive in killing, cold and aloof in temperament, with enough blood on his hands to fill rivers. Rumors also say he was gravely wounded in that great battle, left crippled ever since, bound to a wheelchair day and night, his temper turned vicious and terrifying. He was a taboo. No one in the royal family dared provoke. A king of hell living in legends. And I, a discarded wife pushed out by my husband to take an arrow for him, was actually being bestowed in marriage to such a figure of immense power yet extreme danger. What was the emperor doing? Was it compensation, appeasement, or an even more sophisticated humiliation, tossing me, a defective product, to another defective product, making a pair, so the world could witness the royal family's benevolence? Xiao Wenyuan pushed me toward death for his widowed sister-in-law, and the emperor, to quell this matter, for the sake of so-called royal dignity, pushed me into yet another unfathomable abyss. My fate seemed like nothing but a joke, left for these high and mighty men to toy with as they pleased. After a long while, I slowly raised my head. I looked at the chief eunuch holding the imperial edict, and under his astonished gaze, I neither expressed gratitude nor wept. In grievance, I simply laughed softly, silently. That smile held no joy, no gratitude, only endless desolation and bone-chilling cold. Xiao Wenyuan, you got what you asked for, and I, Luo Ningxuang, from this moment on, have also been reborn. I, your humble servant, Luo Ningxuang, accept the decree. I spoke word by word, my voice not loud, yet it echoed clearly through the vast empty hall, carrying a resolve of mutual destruction. Once the imperial edict was issued, the entire capital erupted in chaos. The deep affection between the second young master of the Duke of Dingguo's manor, Xiao Wenyuan, and his widowed sister-in-law, Zhou Wenqing, became the freshest gossip among the literati. Some praised them for being devoted and righteous, disregarding worldly opinions, comparable to the sages of old. Others secretly sneered, saying this was merely a secret affair all along, using the assassination attempt at the palace banquet as an opportunity to bring their illicit relationship into the open. As for me, Luo Ningxuang, I became the most tragic yet legendary character in this grand drama, a daughter of a military family abandoned by her husband, who was about to become the official consort of the powerful Prince Jing. My fate was more turbulent than even the most bizarre tales from storytellers' lips. On the day the news arrived, carriages crowded outside Changle Palace, with noblewomen from various households coming in an endless stream. They claimed to visit the sick, but truly came to pry. I declined all visitors, citing serious injuries. I needed no one's sympathy, and I disdained dealing with those hypocritical faces. The Duke of Dingguo's manor, however, moved with astonishing speed. The day after the imperial edict was issued, the manor was decorated with lanterns and festoons, brimming with festive joy, as if afraid others wouldn't know they were about to welcome a new bride. Xiao Wenyuan sent the head steward of his household, bringing countless precious medicinal herbs and tonics to Changle Hall. The steward stood before me, bowing, his face plastered with a formulaic smile. "Second young madam." "Oh no, Miss Luo. These are the 1,000-year ginseng king and Tianshan snow lotus that the second young master specially sought for you. He said your body is weak, and you must nourish it well." The second young master also said that although his marital bond with you has ended, familial affection remains. In the future, when you marry into Prince Jing's residence, our two families will still be real relatives and should visit each other often. How high-sounding these words were. He was the one who pushed me out as a shield, and now he is the one hypocritically sending medicine. He probably thought a few precious herbs and some polite words could smooth over that sword through my heart, could make me grateful and continue playing the role of the considerate ex-wife who prioritizes the greater good. The steward took out a letter from his sleeve, presenting it with both hands. "This is a handwritten letter from the second young master for you." Beiji stepped forward to receive it and presented it before me. On the envelope were the 4 characters to Ningxuang personally. The brushstrokes still elegant and flowing, just like when we first met years ago, when he composed poetry for me under the peach blossom tree. Only now, looking at it, I felt nothing but irony. I didn't open the letter, didn't even give it a second glance. Right in front of the butler, I tossed that letter along with the gift list of those expensive medicinal herbs he'd brought into the brazier beside me. The dancing flames instantly devoured the paper, turning that familiar handwriting to ash-faint wisps of smoke rose, carrying a resolute scent of burning. The butler's face instantly went pale as a sheet, his mouth gaping wide enough to fit an egg. "Miss Luo, what are you?" I slowly raised my eyes, my gaze cold as ice. "Vice Minister Xiao thinks he is worthy of discussing family affection with me." "Go back and tell him I, Luo Ningxuang, cannot accept his family affection. Take these things back to wherever they came from. Though the Luo family isn't a top-tier noble house, we haven't fallen so low as to need medicinal herbs from our enemy to survive." My voice wasn't loud yet. Every word was clear, resounding with finality. The butler trembled all over under my gaze, retreating several steps, his lips quivering. Yet he couldn't utter a single word. I paid him no more attention, turning to instruct Beiji, pass on my orders. Thoroughly check all the dowry items I brought into the Shao family back then. Anything Shao Wenyuan gave me afterward, or any keepsakes and gifts exchanged between us. Leave not a single one behind. Pack them all up and send them outside the manor to be burned. If the gold, silver, and jade pieces aren't convenient to burn, throw them all into the moat outside the city. Miss, a hint of reluctance flashed in Baiji's eyes. That pair of matching jade pendants is your favorite, especially that pair of pendants. I interrupted her, my tone brooking no argument. The more thoroughly burned, the better. I don't want any traces of those filthy things remaining in my new life. Seeing my mind was made up, Beiji nodded firmly. The steward, seeing there was nothing to gain, slunk away with his people, and the room returned to quiet. While changing my bandages, Beiji softly sobbed. Miss, are you really not sad at all? I looked at my pale face in the bronze mirror and the gruesome wound on my left shoulder, and spoke calmly. Sad. Why should I be sad? Beiji, remember this. If you get bitten by a mad dog, are you supposed to cry over the wound for the rest of your life? Of course you heal as quickly as possible. Bandage it up. Then watch him from afar. Watch when he catches the plague, when he dies sick on the streets. My tone was too calm, so calm that even Baiji stopped crying, looking at me with a hint of fear. I knew the former Luo Ningxuang, the one who would be delighted for half a day over a single compliment from Shao Wenyuan, who would secretly grieve because he spoke a few more words with Zhou Wangqing, that Luo Ningxuang had already died under that cold arrow in Zichen Palace. The one alive now is a completely new Luo Ningxuang who lives only for herself. The 3-day deadline passed in the blink of an eye. The ceremonial procession from the Imperial Household Department arrived on time outside Changle Palace, with such high standards that it was almost equivalent to a royal princess's wedding. I didn't notify anyone from the Luo family, and alone, supported by Baiji, I stepped on to the Phoenix palanquin heading to Prince Jing's residence. I don't need my maternal family's support, nor do I need their comfort. This path was chosen for me by the Emperor and also chosen by myself. From now on, whether it is a dragon's pool and tiger's den or vast skies and open seas, I'll bear it all alone. The Phoenix palanquin slowly set off. I lifted the carriage curtain and took one last look at this magnificent cage that had trapped me for days. From the direction of Duke Dingguo's residence in the distance came the faint sounds of festive music. I slowly lowered the carriage curtain. It shut out that grating sound, and also shut out my entire past. Shao Wenyuan, I wish you and your Zhou Wanqing 100 years together. May you grow old together and have children soon, while I'm off to embrace my next chapter in life. From now on, mountains high and rivers long lie between us, with no more ties. Prince Jing's residence was situated at the northernmost end of the capital, facing the imperial palace from afar. Yet separated by a wide imperial street, like an insurmountable chasm, isolating the residents from the clamor of the mortal world. Unlike the golden splendor I had imagined, the gates of the Prince Jing's manor were forged from thick black iron. There were no stone lions at the entrance, only 2 guards clad in black armor, with restrained auras standing like statues. The entire mansion was shrouded in an atmosphere of stern solemnity, inspiring awe and fear in all who beheld it. The imperial procession stopped before the manor gates, and I stepped down from the Phoenix palanquin with Baiji's support. The manor gates slowly opened, and a middle-aged man dressed in steward's attire came out to greet us. His expression was solemn, and he bowed to me with neither servility nor arrogance. Your Highness, the Princess Consort, this old servant is the manor's head steward, surnamed Lin. His Highness is already waiting in the main hall. No welcome, no pleasantries. Everything exuded the coldness of formal business. I understood clearly and nodded. Following Steward Lin into the manor, I found the interior furnishings equally minimalist, with traces of weapons and warfare everywhere. The decorations in the hall weren't flowers and birds, but all manner of exotic weapons. The courtyard had no rockeries or ponds, only a vast martial training ground scattered with a few stone locks and archery targets. This place didn't resemble a prince's manor. It was more like a heavily guarded military camp. Crossing the courtyard, we arrived at the main hall. The lighting inside was somewhat dim, and seated in the position of honor was a man my future husband, Prince Yi. He wore a dark robe, his ink-black hair held up by a simple jade hairpin. Even though he was just sitting there quietly, the murderous aura tempered from mountains of corpses and seas of blood was almost suffocating. His features were as strikingly handsome as if carved by a knife, yet completely devoid of warmth. A pair of deep eyes were sharp as an eagle's, as if they could see through one's heart. He just sat there, neither standing up nor speaking, only coldly sizing me up with those scrutinizing eyes. My heart tensed slightly, but my expression remained calm. I stepped forward, and following propriety, bent my knees slightly. "This humble consort Luo Ningxuang greets your highness." He finally spoke, his voice low and hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken in a long time. At ease, after those 2 words, the hall fell into silence again. He didn't tell me to rise, nor did he tell me to sit. He just let me hold that curtsying posture, as if testing my patience. I remained motionless, my back kept perfectly straight. The wound on my shoulder ached faintly, but I showed no sign of it. I knew that from the moment I stepped into this prince's manor, any hint of weakness could become leverage for others to manipulate me. After who knows how long, he finally spoke again, his tone carrying a hint of barely perceptible mockery. "Miss Luo." "Oh no, I should call you Princess Jing now. You should be well aware that this marriage between us is merely a stopgap measure by His Majesty to silence the wagging tongues. This king has no interest in you whatsoever. This consort understands." My calm response seemed to satisfy him somewhat with my tactfulness. "In this manor, there are rules. The east courtyard belongs to you. The west courtyard belongs to me. We shall not interfere with each other's affairs. If you stay in your place and fulfill your role as Princess Jing properly, this king will not treat you unfairly. But if you dare harbor any thoughts you shouldn't have, or try to bring those filthy affairs of the Duke of Dingguo's manor into this residence, don't blame this king for not showing courtesy to the imperial nephew." His words were blunt and harsh, leaving no face for a newlywed wife. I slowly straightened up, meeting his sharp gaze, and spoke with neither servility nor arrogance. "Your Highness, rest assured, this consort and the Duke of Dingguo's manor now share only a blood feud, with no other ties whatsoever. As for thoughts, I shouldn't have. This consort's heart is now dead as ashes. I've long since given up any notions of love. If your Highness does not interfere with this consort would be eternally grateful." My candor seemed to catch him somewhat off guard in those hawk-like eyes of his. A flicker of surprise flashed for the first time. Just then, Bai Ji came forward carrying a medicine box and said softly, "Wang Fei, it is time to change your dressing." I nodded and said to Yi Jin, "If Wang Ye has no other orders, this concubine will return to the courtyard to tend to the wound first." After speaking, without waiting for his reply, I prepared to turn and leave. "Wait!" He suddenly spoke. I stopped in my tracks and turned to look at him. He pointed at my shoulder. "How did the imperial physician treat that wound of yours?" I didn't know why he had such a question, but I answered truthfully. The imperial physician used golden wound medicine and instructed that the dressing must be changed daily, requiring 100 days of rest to fully recover. He let out a cold snort, his tone full of contempt. Those quacks in the palace only know how to use these methods that treat the symptoms but not the root cause. If your wound is treated this way, you'll be in unbearable pain on rainy days in the future, and your left arm will never regain its strength. My heart skipped a beat. What he said was exactly what I was most worried about. Coming from a military family, I knew all too well how severe the aftereffects of such sword wounds could be. Steward Lin, Yi Jin, instructed the head steward Lin beside him, "Go fetch my set of golden needles and bone-mending ointment." Steward Lin acknowledged and left, quickly returning with a rosewood box in his hands. Yi Jin raised his chin at me. "Come here." I hesitated for a moment, but still walked over. I saw him open the wooden box. Inside were golden needles of various lengths neatly arranged, along with a jar of ointment emitting an unusual fragrance. He glanced at me and said, "Undo your clothes." I froze, and Beiji's face also flushed red. She wanted to say something but didn't dare. "What? Afraid this king will take advantage of you?" A mocking curve appeared at the corner of Yi Jin's lips. "Don't worry. This king has no interest in a woman who has been discarded by others. I'm only doing this for the sake of your father, General Luo, not wanting his only daughter to become a cripple for the rest of her life." He mentioned my father, and the last bit of guard in my heart was let down. I turned around, facing away from him, and gestured for Baiji to undo my clothes, revealing the wound on my left shoulder wrapped in thick gauze. When Baiji unwrapped it layer by layer, and the gauze exposed that ghastly gaping wound, I could feel the breathing behind me pause slightly. Yi Jin didn't say anything more. He extended his hand, his cold fingertips lightly touching the skin around my wound. His movements were unexpectedly gentle. Then he picked up a golden needle and inserted it lightning fast into the acupoint beside my wound. I felt a slightly numbing warmth spread from the acupoint, and the unbearable pain from the wound miraculously lessened considerably. His technique was swift, inserting needles, applying medicine, bandaging, all done in one smooth flow. Throughout the entire process, his movements were precise and focused, without a single unnecessary gesture. After rebandaging the wound, he withdrew his hand and said indifferently, "This bone-mending paste is a secret medicine from the northern frontier. Apply it once daily, and it will scab over in 7 days. Within a month, you'll recover completely." I tidied up my clothes, turned around, and sincerely bowed to him. "Thank you, Your Highness," this time. It was gratitude from the bottom of my heart. But he just waved his hand, his expression still cold. "No need to thank me. This prince simply doesn't want the princess consort of Jingwang Manor to be a useless person who can't even lift a sword. Remember your place and don't cause trouble for this prince." After saying that, he waved his hand, signaling me to leave. I didn't say anything more and silently retreated from the main hall with Beiji. Walking on the path toward the east courtyard, I looked back at that imposing main hall, my heart filled with mixed feelings. This legendary Prince Jing seemed to be more complex than the rumors suggested. He was cold and sharp-tongued, yet he didn't seem to be an entirely unreasonable person. My new life began in this strange kind of calm. The days living in Jingwang Manor were much more peaceful than I had imagined. Yi Jin was true to his word. Apart from treating my wounds on the first day, he never set foot in the east courtyard where I lived afterward. We truly stayed out of each other's way, not interfering with one another. The servants in the manor had also received instructions from Steward Lin. They were respectful to me but kept an appropriate distance. This kind of life was a rare respite for me. Under the treatment of Prince Jing's secret medicine, the wound on my shoulder was healing at an astonishing rate. In just 10 days it had scabbed over and fallen off, leaving behind a pink new scar. I started trying to move my left arm, though still a bit stiff. It was no longer a problem. As my body recovered, my spirits improved day by day. I'm no longer that Shao family woman who had to depend on a man to survive. I am Luo Ningxuang, the daughter of a military family who once defeated 30 skilled fighters and emerged victorious at the hunting grounds. I cannot fade into obscurity like this. Early this morning, before dawn, I changed into a practical combat outfit and walked out of the east courtyard. Baiji held up a lantern, following behind me uneasily. "Your Highness, you've just recovered from your injuries, and it is so cold. You should go back inside and rest." "It is fine." I shook my head. "My muscles and bones haven't moved in too long. They're about to rust." I walked straight toward the vast training grounds in the center of the prince's manor. In the dim morning light, there were already quite a few figures on the grounds. The manor's guards were drilling, their shouts uniform and in unison, carrying an air of iron-blooded military discipline. My appearance immediately drew their attention. Everyone stopped what they were doing, looking at me with gazes mixed with curiosity, scrutiny, and a hint of disdain. They were probably all thinking, Why isn't this new princess staying in the inner courtyard where she belongs? What is she doing here among men? I paid no attention to their gazes. I went straight to the weapon rack and took down a wooden sword. The blade felt slightly heavy in my hand, and that familiar sensation made my blood begin to quietly boil. I took a deep breath. I started slowly practicing my Luo family's ancestral swordsmanship in the training ground. At first, my movements were a bit rusty, but as my body loosened up, those moves long etched into my bones flowed out like drifting clouds and flowing water. The sword wind howled, my sleeves fluttered in the air, and I felt as if I had returned to my girlhood. Under my father's stern gaze, sweating profusely in the practice room, after completing the sword routine, I sheathed my sword and stood still. Fine beads of sweat had already formed on my forehead, yet my chest felt completely refreshed. The guards around me were all stunned. The contempt on their faces had long disappeared, replaced by pure surprise and admiration. Just then, a tall figure walked over. He was the head of Jing Wang's guards, named Zhou Yong. It was said he had once been Yi Jin's personal soldier, and his spear skills were divine. The princess has impressive skills. Zhou Yong cupped his fists, his tone fairly polite, but there was a hint of dismissiveness in his eyes. However, though this swordsmanship looks pretty, it is mostly for show. It is not very useful against enemies on the battlefield. I detected the provocation in his words. I knew that these men who crawled out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood alongside Yi Jin looked down on us noble ladies from the capital in their bones. I didn't get angry, just smiled faintly. I said, "Commander Zhou's words are mistaken. Weapons have no superiority or inferiority at all. Depends on the heart of the user. I wonder if Commander Zhou would be willing to offer some guidance." Zhou Yong obviously didn't expect me to take the initiative to challenge him. He froze for a moment, then burst into hearty laughter. "Since the princess consort has such refined interest, I shall naturally accompany you. However, swords and blades have no eyes. If there are any mishaps, I hope the princess consort won't blame me. No matter," I twirled the wooden sword in my hand into a sword flower. "We can stop at the first touch." The surrounding guards immediately gathered around, eagerly preparing to watch the show. In their eyes, this was destined to be a match with no suspense whatsoever. Zhou Yong also took a wooden sword from the weapon rack. He casually weighed it in his hand and said to me, "Princess consort, please." I didn't hold back either. My toes tapped the ground, my figure swift as lightning, executing a move called Swan's Reflection. The sword tip thrust straight at his face. This strike was fast, precise, and ruthless. The essence of my Luo family's swordsmanship. A flash of surprise passed through Zhou Yong's eyes. He clearly hadn't expected my speed to be this fast. He dodged sideways, barely avoiding it, while simultaneously flipping his wrist. The sword swept horizontally, striking directly at my waist and abdomen. Instead of retreating, I advanced, twisting my waist as my wooden sword naturally sank down, deflecting his attack from a tricky angle. The two swords clashed with a muffled sound, and I felt a tremendous force travel through the blade, numbing the web between my thumb and forefinger. This Zhou Yong truly lived up to his reputation, but I didn't back down. My advantage wasn't in strength, but in agility and speed. My figure shifted and changed, sword techniques flowing endlessly like mercury spilling across the ground, finding every opening for a moment. I actually forced Zhou Yong to retreat again and again, and the more he fought, the more alarmed he became. He had thought this princess consort was just a pampered young lady who knew a few amateur moves, but he never expected her swordsmanship to be so exquisite, with killing intent hidden in every strike. He cast aside his contempt and began fighting with all his might. The guards watching nearby were also dumbstruck, murmurs rising all around. This is really the princess consort's skills are better than quite a few brothers in our squad. The commander seems to be getting suppressed. Just as Zhou Yong revealed a tiny opening, I seized the opportunity. With a low shout, I flicked my wrist, and the wooden sword bypassed his defense at an impossible angle, gently resting against his throat. The entire training ground fell instantly silent. Zhou Yong stood frozen in place, cold sweat beading on his forehead. He knew that if I had been holding a real sword, he would already be a dead man. I withdrew my wooden sword, stepped back, cupped my fists, and said, "I was lucky, Commander Zhou." After a long while, Zhou Yong finally came back to his senses. He looked at me, his eyes no longer holding any trace of contempt, only sincere admiration. He solemnly gave me a military salute. Wang Fei's swordsmanship is superb. I, Zhou, admit defeat wholeheartedly. I smiled slightly, about to speak, when I heard a slight commotion from the entrance of the martial arts arena. I looked toward the sound. I saw Yi Jin sitting in a wheelchair, being pushed by Steward Lin, quietly stopped not far away. I don't know how long he had been watching from there. Those unfathomably deep eyes were gazing at me unblinkingly, his expression complicated. I couldn't tell if it was surprise or anger. The morning sunlight fell upon him, casting a faint golden edge on his cold, hard features. Our eyes met, and the air seemed to freeze at that moment. I never expected that the edge I had deliberately hidden for 3 years would be revealed in such a way before my new husband, on the very day it saw the light again. After that day, my status in the Jingwang's residence quietly changed. When the guards saw me, their eyes held a few more degrees of genuine awe, and Steward Lin's attitude toward me became even more respectful. Even my husband Yi Jin, whom I've never met, unexpectedly sent someone to deliver a flexible sword that cuts through iron like mud. The scabbard was inlaid with a South Sea pearl the size of a pigeon's egg, and an ancient character for restraint was carved on the hilt. He said nothing, but I understood his meaning. This was his approval of me. After my injuries healed, the invitation from the palace arrived right on schedule. The empress was hosting a banquet in the imperial garden and invited the noble women of the capital's various households to enjoy the occasion. I knew this would be my first formal appearance in the capital's circle of noble ladies since becoming Princess Jing. I had to attend this banquet. More importantly, I knew Xiao Wenyuan and Zhou Wanqing would definitely be there too. On the day of the banquet, I deliberately chose an elegant lake blue long dress. My long hair was simply held up with a white jade hairpin. I wore no makeup, only using gold powder to trace a small plum blossom over the scar left by the sword wound on my left shoulder. The look was both gracefully refined, yet carried a touch of broken beauty. When I stepped into the imperial garden as Princess Jing, nearly everyone's gaze focused on me. In those gazes were sympathy, curiosity, schadenfreude, and undisguised jealousy. I ignored them all and walked straight to the Empress's seat to pay my respects. The Empress looked at me with a complicated expression. After a long pause, she said, "Princess Jing, no need for formalities, please be seated. You've just recovered. There is no need to stand on ceremony." I thanked for the grace and took my seat. My gaze swept casually across the room, and not far away, I spotted the 2 people I least wanted to see yet. Most wanted to see, Xiao Wenyuan was dressed in a moon-white brocade robe today, making him look even more jade-like and elegant. Beside him, Zhou Wanqing wore a pink silk dress, her belly slightly swollen. With a happy and shy smile on her face, she was carefully caressing her stomach, while Xiao Wenyuan murmured gentle words of concern beside her. The 2 of them looked deeply in love, a perfect couple. What a lovely picture of mutual affection if they weren't standing on my pile of bones. I would have almost applauded them. As if sensing my gaze, Xiao Wenyuan raised his head and looked toward me. When he saw me, a flash of barely noticeable amazement crossed his eyes, which then transformed into a condescending pity. He brought Zhou Wanqing and walked toward me on his own initiative. The noblewomen around immediately perked up their ears, ready to watch a good show. "Ningxuang, it has been a while. Is your injury getting better?" Xiao Wenyuan spoke first, his tone gentle, as if there had never been any grievance between us. I picked up the teacup in front of me, gently blew on the foam without even lifting my eyelids. Seeing that I had no reaction, Zhou Wanqing at the side stepped forward softly and delicately. With just the right amount of apology on her face, she said, "Princess Consort, what happened that day was all Wanqing's fault. If not for me, you wouldn't have suffered such a serious injury. Wanqing feels guilty in her heart, and hopes that you won't blame Wenyuan." Her words sounded like an apology, but every sentence was actually clearing Xiao Wenyuan of responsibility, attributing everything to herself, putting on a pitiful appearance that could best arouse a man's protective instincts. Sure enough, Xiao Wenyuan immediately pulled her into his arms, frowning at me, and said, "Ningxuang, this matter has nothing to do with Wanqing. She is already pregnant, and her emotions shouldn't be agitated. Now that you've married into the Jing Wang manor and become a member of the imperial family, you should also restrain that rough and wild air from your military household and learn how to be magnanimous." He admonished me in a tone befitting an elder, or rather a former husband, as if I would be petty and ignorant if I took issue with it. A few suppressed laughs came from around us, and those noblewomen looked at me with eyes full of amusement. I set down my teacup and slowly raised my head, my gaze meeting theirs directly for the first time. I didn't look at Xiao Wenyuan, but at Zhou Wanqing in his arms, who was on the verge of tears, a faint yet extremely cold smile curling at the corner of my lips. "Madame Xiao, I cannot accept being called sister by you." My voice wasn't loud yet. It clearly reached the ears of everyone present, after all. I don't have a sister so frail that she needs someone to risk their life to protect her. One sentence, like a needle, it precisely pierced through the facade of their loving act. Zhou Wanqing's face instantly turned deathly pale, her body swaying as if about to collapse. Xiao Wenyuan's face also turned ashen in an instant. He glared at me furiously. "Luo Ningxuang, you—" I didn't give him the chance to continue. Rising gracefully to my feet, I turned my gaze toward him, my smile deepening. What Minister Xiao says is true. Now that Ningxuang's status is different, I should indeed be more magnanimous. After all, not everyone is so blessed as to be like Minister Xiao, willing to disregard even his own wife's life for the sake of his beloved. Such deep affection is truly moving enough to touch the heavens. I deliberately emphasized the words deep affection. The moment these words left my mouth, the entire scene fell into dead silence. The noble ladies around us all widened their eyes, their faces showing undisguised shock and excitement. Although everyone had heard rumors about what happened at the palace banquet that night, no one dared to bring it up openly. Yet I, the person involved, had just so casually torn open that bloody truth for all to see. I saw Xiao Wenyuan's fists clenching in his sleeves, knuckles cracking audibly. His handsome face twisted slightly with anger. He probably never dreamed that Luo Ningxuang, who used to obey his every word and didn't even dare to speak loudly, would now dare to poke at his spine so mercilessly in front of so many people. "You, what nonsense are you spouting?" he scolded, fierce in manner but cowardly at heart. "Nonsense?" I raised an eyebrow, my gaze slowly sweeping over everyone present before finally landing on him. I let out a light laugh. "Vice Minister Xiao, what you do on earth, heaven is watching. Do the beams of Zichen Hall still remember the blood from that night? Or does Vice Minister Xiao think the scar on my shoulder is something I accidentally got from a fall?" My words were like an invisible knife, peeling off his hypocritical mask piece by piece, revealing the ugliest truth underneath. He was rendered speechless by my retort, his face turning the color of pig liver. Just then, the Empress's majestic voice broke the deadlock. "Enough, all of you. Such commotion in the imperial garden. What kind of behavior is this?" I took the opportunity to withdraw my gaze and nodded slightly toward the Empress's direction, giving him some face. Xiao Wenyuan also grabbed onto this lifeline, hurriedly pulling the tottering Zhou Wanqing along. They retreated in utter embarrassment. No matter how you looked at their departing figures, there was a distinct sense of fleeing in panic. Watching their panicked appearance, I felt no sense of vengeful satisfaction in my heart, only indifference. To me, they were already a thing of the past. Today's words were merely to tell everyone that I, Luo Ningxuang, am not a pushover to be toyed with. Whoever makes my life difficult, I'll make theirs even worse. However, I didn't notice that in a pavilion at another corner of the imperial garden, a pair of eyes deep as a cold pool were watching through layers of flower shadows, taking in everything that had just happened. After that unpleasant chrysanthemum viewing banquet ended, I became thoroughly famous among the noble ladies' circles in the capital. Some said I didn't know my place, having already obtained the honorable position of Princess Jing. I still wouldn't let go of my former husband, losing the grace of a proper lady. Others secretly cheered, saying I did the right thing. When dealing with a heartless and faithless man like Xiao Wenyuan, he deserved to lose all face. As for these discussions, I paid them no mind. My life remained calm as still water every day. Besides practicing swordsmanship, I would browse through the collection in Prince Jing's study. Yi Jin's study was extremely large, containing not only military strategies and tactics, but also many long-lost rare editions and secrets from previous dynasties. These things were far more interesting than those women's petty gossip. The direct confrontation with Xiao Wenyuan at the chrysanthemum banquet seemed like a moment of impulse on my part, but it actually stirred up a long-standing doubt in my heart. Was the assassination that night really just a coincidence? The assassin's target was that white-haired censor in charge of the Ministry of Revenue's accounts. But why did Lu Jin shoot at Xiao Wenyuan? Xiao Wenyuan's seat was some distance from that censor. The whole chaos seemed to be aimed at the censor, but in the end, the censor was unharmed. I was seriously injured, and Xiao Wenyuan actually benefited from the disaster, not only getting rid of me, his original wife, but also naturally elevating his sweetheart to the position of principal wife. All of this is just too coincidental. That day, while I was reviewing the palace banquet records of the Daye Dynasty from the past 10 years in the study, Yi Jin rarely appeared in the study. He was still sitting in that wheelchair. Steward Lin pushed him to my desk and then quietly withdrew. "What are you looking at?" He spoke up, breaking the silence in the room. "Just browsing." I closed the dossier in my hand and looked up at him. "What brings the prince here today?" He didn't answer my question, but glanced at the dossier in front of me and said indifferently, still brooding over what happened at the chrysanthemum banquet. I shook my head. Trading barbs is meaningless. I'm just thinking that the assassination that night might not be as simple as it appeared on the surface. A hint of approval flashed in Yi Jin's eyes, and he gestured for me to continue. I gathered my thoughts and began. The assassin's target was the former censor of the Ministry of Revenue, that is beyond doubt. But their actions seemed somewhat deliberate. They created massive chaos, yet failed to strike the killing blow. Instead, they let the Imperial Guard react quickly. This doesn't seem like well-trained assassins, but more like a show put on for everyone to see. Yi Jin's eyebrows raised slightly. I said with certainty, a show to cover up the real purpose. The former censor controls the nation's finances and is a key figure in the new reforms. Moving against him equals declaring war on His Majesty directly. That is the worst strategy. But what if they only wanted to use the assassination attempt as a pretense to create chaos at the palace banquet, thereby achieving another goal? My gaze became sharp. For instance, eliminating someone who is in the way, or making certain things seem perfectly natural. Yi Jin gave me a deep look, and for the first time, genuine appreciation showed in those profound eyes. He spoke slowly. "You mean that arrow shot at you wasn't a stray one, but someone did it deliberately?" "I have no evidence," I said frankly, "but it defies common sense. The Imperial Guard's defense was watertight. Assassins on the perimeter couldn't possibly have shot an arrow into the inner hall. That arrow could only have been shot from inside the hall. And among the guests present, who would be carrying a bow and arrows and who would have the motive to want me dead, or want something to happen to me?" The answer was self-evident. Yi Jin fell silent, and the only sound left in the study was the soft crackling of the burning candles. After a long while, he finally spoke slowly, his voice somewhat gentler than before. "Your guess is bold, but also quite reasonable." He turned his wheelchair and took down a black iron box from the bookshelf behind him, placing it in front of me. "What is this?" I asked. "The case files from that night's assassination attempt." "Some things the Shadow Guards investigated," he said flatly. "Since you're interested, take a look." I looked at him with some surprise. This was classified as a confidential major case, yet he just gave it to me so easily. I opened the iron box, and inside was a thick stack of documents. I carefully read through them, growing more shocked the more I read. The files recorded that the identities of those assassins had been confirmed. They were from a killer organization in the Jianggu, but the trail to the mastermind behind them had gone cold. However, the Shadow Guards had uncovered an extremely secretive lead. A few days before the assassination attempt, the Dingguo Duke's mansion had a huge sum of silver in their accounts that flowed through several money houses to an unknown account. What shocked me even more was another matter. The Shadow Guard discovered that Xiao Wenyuan's elder brother, the late heir apparent Xiao Wenjing, his cause of death didn't seem as simple as the publicly claimed death by illness. Before his death, he had a fierce argument with the Duke of Dingguo, his father, and the one who benefited most after his death was undoubtedly Xiao Wenyuan. One thing after another, all pointing to that seemingly honorable Duke of Dingguo's mansion. I put down the dossier, feeling a chill run down my spine. I had thought Xiao Wenyuan was merely a selfish and cold-hearted man, willing to sacrifice his own wife for so-called love and heirs. But now it seems his ambition and ruthlessness far exceeded my imagination. What exactly does the Duke of Dingguo's mansion want? I murmured to myself. Want what? Yi Jin sneered, his eyes showing unconcealed contempt. What noble families want is nothing more than those two things: power and status. The Xiao family is powerful, and the current Duke of Dingguo is an ambitious man. His Majesty's new reforms to weaken the noble families touch their interests first and foremost. I understood instantly the assassination of the former censor was a fake to create chaos, seizing the opportunity to eliminate me, the legitimate wife from a military family with a strong-willed personality, and elevate Zhou Wangqing, who was pregnant and whose maternal family had no foundation whatsoever. This way, they could better control the inner household, even collude with certain forces to plot treason. This was their true purpose, and I was merely a pawn in their plan that could be discarded at any time. Your Highness? I raised my head and looked at Yi Jin with determination. I want to continue investigating. This isn't just for myself, but for the Luo family behind me. If the Xiao family's scheme is real, then the Luo family, who married into the Xiao family, will sooner or later be dragged down, becoming their stepping stone and scapegoat for treason. Yi Jin looked at me, a trace of complex emotion flashing in his eyes. He seemed not to have expected that not only was I not frightened by the conspiracy behind this, but instead it had ignited my fighting spirit. Very well. He nodded slowly, and spoke a decision I hadn't anticipated. This prince will help you investigate. When Yi Jin spoke those 5 words, this prince will help you investigate, I admit my heart was touched by a strange emotion at that moment. Unlike Xiao Wenyuan's hypocritical tenderness, there wasn't the slightest hint of ambiguity in Yi Jin's words, only a pure decision based on factual judgment. What he valued was my composure, my analytical ability, and my potential value as a daughter of the Luo family in providing military connections. It was a feeling of being treated as an equal, being seen as an asset rather than a dependent. This feeling, I've never experienced it with Xiao Wenyuan. Your father, Minister Luo, has students and former subordinates spread throughout the military, especially in the northern border army where half of the generals were once promoted by him. Yi Jin's voice pulled my thoughts back to reality. If the Duke of Dingguo's residence wants to plant people in the military or collude with border generals, they would inevitably encroach upon your father's sphere of influence. I immediately understood his meaning. Does your Highness want me to investigate through my father's connections, whether there are any irregularities in the military? Yi Jin shook his head. You cannot ask Minister Luo directly. He is upright, but also straightforward, and could easily alert the enemy. Besides, you're a married daughter. Frequently contacting your maiden family about military affairs would arouse suspicion. Then what does your Highness suggest? I asked. This prince will give you a list. He turned his wheelchair and took out a roll of parchment from a hidden compartment in the desk. These people are all former subordinates of your father, now holding important positions in the military. Among them, some are loyal and devoted, while others may have already turned traitor. What you need to do is use your understanding of them to analyze who we can win over and who we need to guard against. He handed me the parchment. I unfolded it and saw over a dozen names written densely on it, along with their positions, birthplaces, and personality traits. so detailed it was alarming. This was clearly intelligence that couldn't be gathered overnight. I looked at him, understanding dawning in my heart. This Prince Jing, who seemed to have distanced himself from court disputes, had probably never truly let go of his control over this country. Your analysis combined with my Shadow Guard's intelligence, only with both approaches can we tear open the Shao family's defenses the fastest. Yi Jin's gaze fell on my face, carrying an undeniable pressure. Luo Ningxuang, will you do this or not? This was no longer a multiple-choice question, but a command, yet I felt no sense of being forced. On the contrary, a long-lost excitement of controlling my own fate rose from the depths of my heart. I'll do it, I answered without hesitation, but this concubine also has one condition. Speak. I need to know all the investigation progress of your Highness's Shadow Guards. I don't want to be a blind fool kept in the dark anymore, manipulated by others, I said, looking straight into his eyes, enunciating every word. Yi Jin and I locked eyes for a moment. Those deep eyes seemed to see right through me. After a while, he slowly nodded. Very well. He unfastened a dark iron token from his waist and handed it to me. The token felt cold to the touch. On the front was the character Jean, written in bold, flowing strokes, and on the back was an intricate totem. This is my personal guard token. With this token, you can mobilize all the guard forces in the manor except for my personal shadow guards, and you can also access all the intelligence they submit at any time, he said calmly. Steward Lin will tell you how to use it. I gripped the token tightly in my hand. This small iron medallion was light, yet worth more than gold. It represented Yi Jin's trust in me, and it also meant I had officially transformed from a passive victim into a player who could make active moves in this game of chess. From this moment on, between Yi Jin and me, an unspoken alliance was formed. Our cooperation was remarkably efficient. I shut myself in the study for 3 whole days, relying on my childhood memories of following my father in the military camp, and my understanding of the temperaments of those general uncles. I analyzed and categorized everyone on that list, one by one, who was a loyal and brave man, who was a sycophant, and who might be compromised because of their family. I wrote my analysis into a detailed report and handed it to Yi Jin. After Yi Jin read it, he only said one word: accurate. Soon after, Prince Jing's mansion's shadow guard system began operating at high speed. Based on my analysis, they targeted those suspicious generals on the list for surveillance and investigation, and quickly made a breakthrough. A vice commander stationed at Tongzhou Guard had been behaving abnormally recently, not only having secret correspondence with the Duke Dingguo's mansion in the capital. His family had also suddenly become wealthy, and this vice commander was precisely the one in my analysis who appeared honest but was actually greedy for wealth and profit. When I received this secret report from Steward Lin, I saw Yi Jin sitting by a window not far away, holding a volume of military strategy in his hands. The sunlight outside streamed through the carved wooden window, casting mottled light and shadow on him, making his cold, hard profile appear somewhat softer. He didn't turn around yet, seemed to know I was watching him, and spoke lightly. Well done, this simple praise. Yet it comforted me more than all of Xiao Wenyuan's sweet words over the past 3 years, because I knew this praise wasn't because of my beauty, wasn't because of my obedience, but because of my ability, my value. I placed the secret report back on the table, walked to his side, looked at the desolate early winter scene outside the window, and said softly, "This is just the beginning." He acknowledged with a sound, turned a page of the book. The Xiao family's roots run deeper than you imagine. Pull out the radish, and the mud will naturally come with it. I looked at his focused profile, and a thought suddenly arose in my heart. Your Highness, I spoke up, Xiao Wenyuan's son, who just turned 1 month old, is having his full moon banquet on the 3rd of next month. He'll surely invite guests to celebrate grandly. Yi Jin's hand paused while flipping the book. He raised his head to look at me, a hint of inquiry in his eyes. You want to go? Of course I'm going. I smiled slightly, that smile carrying a trace of icy coldness. How could such a lively occasion be complete without me, the former lady of the house, going to offer congratulations. Besides, I think it would be a great opportunity to observe them trying to blend in. Yijin looked at my smile and was silent for a moment. Then the corner of his lips slowly curved into an extremely faint yet meaningful arc. "All right," he said. "This prince will accompany you." The full moon banquet at the Duke Dingguo's residence was more lavish and grand than a wedding. The entire mansion was decorated with lanterns and festoons. Guests filled the place like clouds, and almost all the prominent figures in the capital had gathered. Xiao Wenyuan stood at the entrance holding his son with Zhou Wangqing, greeting guests with high spirits. The child was given the name Chang'en, the meaning self-evident. When my carriage with Yijin stopped in front of the Duke of Dingguo's mansion, the commotion at the entrance instantly fell silent, and everyone's eyes turned towards us in unison. I was dressed in a moon-white long dress, with dark patterns embroidered in silver thread on the hem, as if moonlight was flowing with my movements. The scar on my shoulder was cleverly concealed by an exquisite butterfly gold ornament, and my expression was calm. My graceful demeanor alongside Yi Jin, who sat in a wheelchair yet exuded an overwhelmingly powerful presence, formed a strange yet harmonious scene. The smile on Xiao Wenyuan's face froze. He probably didn't expect that I would come, let alone that Yi Jin would accompany me. Zhou Wangqing hid behind Xiao Wenyuan, holding the child, looking at me with eyes full of resentment and fear, as if I wasn't here to attend a banquet, but to claim lives. "Your Highness Prince Jing, Your Highness Princess, your presence honors us. Forgive me for not welcoming you from afar." Xiao Wenyuan quickly adjusted his expression and squeezed out a smile to step forward and bow. Yi Jin didn't even raise his eyelids, just gave a faint and was pushed straight into the mansion by Steward Lin. I followed behind him. When passing by Xiao Wenyuan, I stopped, my gaze falling on the infant in the swaddling clothes in Zhou Wangqing's arms, and said with a smile, "Congratulations, Vice Minister Xiao, on having a son to carry on your legacy." My tone was so sincere without a single flaw, yet Xiao Wenyuan's expression became even uglier. He knew every word I said was reminding him. Everything he possessed now was built upon what kind of betrayal. At the banquet, we were arranged in the most distinguished seats, amid the clinking of glasses. Xiao Wenyuan held his son and went around toasting, accepting everyone's flattery. "Congratulations, Attendant Xiao. This child's features really resemble the late Wenjing heir. He'll surely have a boundless future. Yes, yes, indeed. The Duke Dingguo's manor has an heir now. How wonderful." Listening to these compliments, the smug look on Xiao Wenyuan's face was almost overflowing. He deliberately carried the child over to our table, raised his wine cup high to Yi Jin, and said, "Your Highness, Wenyuan offers you a toast. This child is the only bloodline of Wenyuan's elder brother. That he could be born safely today is all thanks to His Majesty and Your Highness's consideration." These words of his were both showing off and probing, showing off that he had continued the bloodline for the family, probing Yi Jin's attitude toward our marriage. Yi Jin still had that cold demeanor. He didn't touch his wine cup, only said indifferently, "Passing on one's bloodline is only natural. It is just that sometimes being too obsessed with this can instead become a constraint." The smile on Xiao Wenyuan's face remained unchanged. Just then, I had Baiji present the congratulatory gift I had prepared. It was an exquisite brocade box, which Baiji opened in front of everyone. Inside was not gold, silver, or jade, but a copy of Strategies of the Warring States that I had transcribed by hand. Everyone was stunned, not knowing what I was up to. I stood up and smiled slightly at Xiao Wenyuan. "I've heard that Attendant Xiao has high hopes for his son. As an elder, Ningxuang has no grand gift to offer. This Strategies of the Warring States is a classic of political strategy. I hope the young master will study it well in the future, learning the art of diplomacy and maneuvering within, so as to bring glory to the Xiao family name." As soon as my words fell, I casually turned toward Yi Jin, my voice not loud, but enough for everyone around to hear. The prince sees things clearly after all. Rather than placing hopes on intangible bloodlines, it is more practical to strengthen oneself and hold power in one's own hands. After all, Things in this world change in an instant. Who can guarantee that today's glory will last until tomorrow? Upon hearing this, Yi Jin actually nodded in deep agreement. He raised the teacup before him and toasted me from afar, showing his approval. My words and Yi Jin's attitude, like two heavy hammers, they struck hard upon Xiao Wenyuan's heart. His complexion instantly shifted from red to green, then from green to white, quite a spectacular display. His greatest pride, the very foundation upon which he established himself, carrying on the family bloodline, was utterly denied by me in such an off-handed manner, even with a hint of pity. Not only did I deny him, but I did so in front of everyone, standing on the same ground of values as the supremely powerful Prince Jing. We were talking about power, about personal strength, while he, Xiao Wenyuan, was still smugly pleased about having a son. This was a dimensional strike, a ruthless crushing of what he treasured most on a spiritual level. He stood there holding that child, feeling that what he held wasn't some hope for the family, but a colossal mockery. He wanted to retort, but found he couldn't utter a single word, because in front of Prince Jing Yi Jin, his petty position as Vice Minister of Personnel, his petty pride as a scion of a noble family, were utterly worthless. The guests around weren't fools either. One by one, eyes on noses, noses on hearts. They didn't dare even breathe loudly. The looks they gave Xiao Wenyuan shifted from envy to sympathy and amusement. Words that pierced the heart wound far deeper than knives. I looked at Xiao Wenyuan's ashen face, feeling not a ripple of emotion in my heart. I slowly sat down, picked up my teacup, and continued savoring the fine tea at this banquet, as if those words that had just stirred up a storm had nothing to do with me. Xiao Wenyuan, this is just the beginning. The humiliation you brought me, I will repay it double, bit by bit, in the way you care about most. The heart-piercing words at the full moon banquet were just an appetizer. The real counterattack has only just begun. Through Yi Jin's shadow guards and that black iron token, an invisible net is quietly spreading from the Prince Jing's residence toward the Duke Dingguo's mansion. Intelligence flows in like trickling streams, continuously gathering on my desk. That deputy general of the Tongzhou Guard, after the shadow guards casually leaked that his correspondence with the Xiao family might have been detected by the Ministry of War, he immediately panicked. He transferred the bribes he had received at home overnight, unaware that his every move had fallen under the shadow guard surveillance. Meanwhile, I focused my attention on another more secretive thread. If the Xiao family wants to make moves in the military, they cannot bypass a key link: military weapons. The dynasty's control over military weapons is extremely strict. From forging, transportation to distribution, there is a complete system in place. If the Xiao family wants to make any moves in private, they will inevitably leave traces in this system. My father has held power in the Ministry of War for many years and knows this system like the back of his hand. Although it is inconvenient for me to ask him directly, the things I picked up as a child have given me some knowledge of it. I wrote down several key foundry locations and transport routes and handed them to Steward Lin. Within 3 days, the secret guards sent back news. They had discovered a mysterious group disguised as a merchant caravan on a trade route in the northwest. What they were transporting was precisely the refined iron and gunpowder that the Ministry of War had explicitly forbidden from private trade, and this group's final destination pointed to Yanmen Pass, a border stronghold adjacent to foreign territories. More importantly, the ones escorting this group were a patrol squad from Yanmen Pass, and the commanding general of Yanmen Pass happened to be a former deputy general who had served under Xiao Wenyuan's father, the old Duke Dingguo. The clues thus connected together. The Xiao family had not only planted trusted allies in the court with treacherous intentions, but was also secretly colluding with border generals, trafficking military equipment, lining their own pockets, and possibly even dealing with foreign tribes. This was no longer simple corruption, but the heinous crime of treason and betraying the nation. Holding the secret report, I only felt my fingertips turn ice cold. I hadn't expected the Xiao family's ambition had already swelled to such an extent. The evidence isn't enough yet. Yi Jin looked at the secret report in my hands. his expression cold and stern. With just one merchant caravan, the Duke Dingwo's mansion can completely wash their hands clean. We need a witness, one who can testify against them and leave them with no way to refute. Witness testimony, a flash of inspiration crossed my mind, and I thought of someone, Your Highness. I wish to see someone. I said to Yi Jin, his name is Meng Siyuan. He was once a lieutenant general under my father's command, but because of his uprightness and integrity, he offended the old Duke Dingwo, who was still vice minister of war at the time. They found an excuse to have him dismissed and investigated. Now he makes a living teaching in the outskirts of the capital. What is so special about this person? He was in charge of the final step of military equipment storage. The reason he was dismissed back then was because he discovered a batch of military equipment with incorrect quantities and wanted to report it. But the Shao family struck first and pinned a charge of embezzlement on him, I recalled. Although father managed to protect him at the time, he couldn't clear his name. I believe he must still have the evidence from back then. A glint flashed in Yi Jin's eyes. This plan is feasible, but Meng Siyuan has been deeply hurt by the Shao family and may not be willing to come forward again. I'll go persuade him. I stood up, my gaze resolute. The one who tied the bell must untie it. The matter back then started because of my Luo family, and now it should be resolved by my Luo family as well. It was a snowy afternoon. I changed into plain cotton clothes, and under Steward Lin's arrangement, I took an inconspicuous carriage to a thatched cottage in the outskirts of the capital. Meng Siyuan was chopping firewood in the courtyard. His figure was thin, and his temples had already turned gray with age. He no longer resembled the spirited young lieutenant general he once was. When he saw me, a flash of surprise passed through his eyes. It quickly turned into a distant indifference. Miss Luo, I wonder what brings you here. He set down his axe, his tone polite yet distant. Uncle Meng, I gave him a deep bow. Ningxuang has come today regarding an old case from years past, and also to apologize to you. I told him everything about what the Shao family had done, as well as my suspicions. I didn't beg him to come forward as a witness. I simply laid out all the stakes before him. I know what happened back then left you disheartened. Ningxuang wouldn't dare force you to do anything for me, or for the Luo family today. But what the Shao family is doing now is no longer a private family grudge. It concerns the safety of the nation. If they're allowed to continue, the border that the soldiers of the northern frontier fought and bled to protect may be destroyed in an instant. After I finished speaking, I stood quietly in the snow, waiting for his answer. Meng Siyuan fell silent. He looked at the bare old tree in the courtyard, his gaze distant and complicated. After a long while, he let out a long sigh. He turned and walked into the house. A moment later, he came back out, holding a small box tightly wrapped in oilcloth in his hands. He handed the box to me, his voice hoarse as he said, "Inside this are the original military equipment inventory ledgers from back then, as well as a letter personally written by the late Duke Dingwo asking me to be accommodating." I took the box, feeling it weighed 1,000 pounds. I had waited for this day for a full 2 years. Meng Siyuan looked at me, a glimmer of light reigniting in his eyes. "Tell General Luo that although I, Meng Siyuan, have taken off that military uniform, I will forever be a soldier of Daye in my bones." I bowed deeply to him once again. "Thank you, Uncle Meng." On the way back to the prince's residence, the snow fell heavier and heavier. I sat in the warm carriage, but my heart was burning with fire. Xiao Wenyuan, your time of death has come. I thought that with such ironclad evidence in hand, bringing down the Duke Dingwo's residence was only a matter of time. However, I still underestimated Xiao Wenyuan's ruthlessness and cunning. Just on the eve when I handed Meng Siyuan's testimony to Yi Jin and prepared to launch a fatal strike in court together with the censorate, Xiao Wenyuan struck first, using an extremely insidious move to pull the rug out from under me. The next day at morning court, he actually joined forces with several remonstrance officials, submitted memorials to impeach my father, Minister of War Luo Yuanshan. The charges were poor judgment in employing people and negligent supervision, claiming that among the prot-fei Gifeis my father had promoted in his early years, someone had been corrupt and bent the law in the provinces. And my father, cherishing his reputation, had deliberately covered it up. The prot-fei Gifei he was referring to was precisely Meng Siyuan, who had been framed years ago for offending the Shao family. This move by Xiao Wenyuan was utterly vicious. He didn't bother to argue whether the evidence in Meng Siyuan's hands was real or fake, but instead directly attacked the witness's character, portraying Meng Siyuan as a tainted witness with a criminal record. This way, even if Meng Siyuan produced the account books and letters, the credibility of his testimony would be greatly diminished in court. What is more insidious is that he pointed the finger directly at my father. He was warning me that if I insisted on dragging the Shao family down, then my father, the entire Luo family, shouldn't expect to stay out of it either. This was a naked threat. He was forcing me to hold back in this life-or-death struggle for fear of hurting those I care about. When the news reached the Prince Jing's residence, I was trimming a pot of clivia. Hearing Baiji's anxious report, my flower-cutting motion paused slightly, and a green leaf fell in response. Wang Fei, the master, was besieged by them on the bridge. His Majesty hasn't expressed his stance yet, but his expression looked very grim. Now everyone outside is saying that the Luo family and the Shao family are going to completely tear each other apart. Baiji was so anxious she was about to cry. I slowly set down the golden scissors in my hand. Though my heart was also stirring with waves, my expression remained calm. Xiao Wenyuan, you really are ruthless enough. To protect yourself, you wouldn't hesitate to drag everyone down to hell with you. This indeed posed me a difficult problem. If I brought down the Shao family, my father might be implicated, his career damaged. If I stopped now, it would be like letting a tiger return to the mountains, leaving endless future troubles. I briefly fell into a dilemma, just as I was thinking of a countermeasure. Steward Lin hurried in, Princess Consort. The prince requests your presence in the study. When I walked into the study, Yi Jin was standing by the window. He wasn't in his wheelchair, but was leaning on a cane, his figure as upright as a pine tree. This was the first time I saw him stand up. You've heard about what happened in court. He didn't turn around, his voice calm and flat. I have, I replied. What do you plan to do? He asked. I was silent for a moment, then said frankly, I haven't decided yet. Father is my only weakness. Yi Jin slowly turned around. He looked at me, and in those deep eyes there was a trace of tenderness I had never seen before. No, it wasn't tenderness, but a more resolute strength that could put one's heart at ease. Your weakness shouldn't become a weapon for your enemies to attack you. He spoke slowly. Luo Ningxuang, do you trust me? I looked at him and nodded without the slightest hesitation. I do. Good, he said. Only one word, then ordered to the outside, prepare the carriage to enter the palace. I didn't know what he was going to do, but I chose to trust him. The Prince of Jing's carriage traveled unimpeded all the way into the imperial palace. Outside the imperial study, we saw Xiao Wenyuan, who had just left court and was preparing to return to his residence. When he saw us, a smug, cold smile appeared on his face. He probably thought I was the prince's uncle driven to desperation by him, coming to beg Yi Jin to plead with the emperor. Prince's wife, he bowed with feigned respect. I didn't expect to meet you here. Is the princess here for your father's matter? Minister Ai Luo was also unfortunate in his choice of friends. This official was only acting for the court's laws. I had no choice. I hope the princess won't take offense. He put on a business facade, disgustingly hypocritical. I was about to open my mouth to retort, but Yi Jin beat me to it. He spoke calmly, Vice Minister Xiao, framing loyal officials and threatening imperial relatives. Do you know what crime that is? Yi Jin's voice wasn't loud, but it was like a heavy hammer slamming hard onto Xiao Wenyuan's heart. Xiao Wenyuan's face changed instantly. What does the prince mean by this? This humble official doesn't understand. Don't understand. Yi Jin sneered. He took out a memorial from his sleeve and threw it directly at Xiao Wenyuan's face. See for yourself what this is. Xiao Wenyuan clumsily caught the memorial, a Upon opening it and taking just one look, his face instantly turned pale as paper, completely drained of color. On that memorial, it clearly recorded all the details of how he had coerced and bribed the chief judge who handled Meng Siwen's case back then, how he had fabricated evidence and trumped up charges. Witnesses and physical evidence were all complete. You people, Xiao Wenyuan pointed at us, his lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. He had calculated everything, but never expected Yi Jin to act so quickly. While he was still gloating over the success of his scheme, Yi Jin's shadow guards had already dug up everything about him. Yi Jin paid him no more attention, only saying to me, "Let's go. His Majesty is still waiting for us." We walked past the devastated Xiao Wenyuan straight into the imperial study. Emperor Yi Zhao had been waiting for a long time. He looked at us and sighed. "Imperial Uncle Ningxuang, you're here. I already know about the Xiao family matter." Yi Jin handed up the memorial impeaching Xiao Wenyuan. "Your Majesty, Xiao Wenyuan first framed loyal officials, and now he is confusing right and wrong in court, threatening the Minister of War. His intentions are unforgivable." Emperor Yi Zhao took the memorial, his expression growing even darker. I stepped forward and knelt on the ground. "Your Majesty, my father may have failed to properly vet his subordinates, but he absolutely had no intention of covering anything up. Xiao Wenyuan's impeachment is revenge in disguise. It is because I found evidence of his Duke Dingguo's manner colluding with foreign enemies." As I spoke, I presented Meng Siwen's belongings along with all the evidence the shadow guards had gathered. Emperor Yi Zhao looked at the mountain of evidence. The dragon's fury erupted as he slammed his palm on the dragon throne's desk and roared, "What a Duke Dingguo's manner! What a Xiao Wenyuan, deceiving the emperor, colluding with enemies, and betraying the nation guards." Xiao Wenyuan's struggles not only failed to put me in a difficult position, instead it was like the last straw that broke the camel's back, completely igniting the emperor's fury and accelerating his own downfall, all his schemes and plots. Before Yi Jin's absolute power and thunderous methods, they seemed so vulnerable. Coming out of the palace, dusk was approaching. A long brewing political storm was about to unfold over the capital. But my heart was calmer than ever before, because I knew that from now on I would no longer be fighting alone. The carriage slowly traveled on the road back to the prince's mansion. The light inside the compartment was dim, and the atmosphere was somewhat silent. "Thank you, Your Highness." I spoke up first, breaking the silence. This gratitude came from the bottom of my heart. If not for his thunderous methods today, even if my father could clear his name, he would still inevitably attract trouble. Yi Jin leaned against the carriage wall with his eyes closed, seemingly somewhat tired. Hearing my words, he slowly opened his eyes. Those deep pupils appeared particularly bright in the dim light. "This prince said that your weakness shouldn't become a weapon for enemies," he said indifferently. "Besides, the Xiao family is His Majesty's biggest concern. What this prince did today was both for you and for His Majesty, for this great kingdom. He was always like this, making everything sound like official business, as if there were no personal feelings involved. But I knew that wasn't the case. The carriage reached a fork in the road and didn't head directly back to the Jing prince's mansion, but turned toward the outskirts of the capital. "Where are we going?" I asked, somewhat puzzled. "Hot Spring Mountain," he answered succinctly. "Although the wound on your shoulder has healed, the cold has seeped into your bones. You need to soak in the medicinal spring to completely eliminate future problems." My heart warmed. I didn't expect he still remembered my injury. Tangquan Mountain is a private imperial hot spring villa, heavily guarded. Ordinary people cannot approach it at all. Our carriage drove directly into the depths of the villa, stopping in front of an elegant courtyard. Steam lingered within the courtyard. A natural hot spring pool. White smoke was rising gently. Clean clothes and fragrant dew leaves had already been prepared on the white jade stones by the pool. All the servants were dismissed, leaving only the two of us in the entire courtyard. "Go ahead," he said to me. I hesitated for a moment, but still walked behind the screen and changed into a bathrobe. When I walked out again, Yi Jin was no longer in the wheelchair, but sitting on the jade stone by the pool with his legs soaking in the warm spring water. He had taken off his outer robe, wearing only a thin inner garment, revealing his firm and well-defined arms. I saw that his back and arms were covered with crisscrossing scars, knife wounds, sword wounds, each one seeming to tell the story of a brutal battle. One of the deepest scars extended from his left shoulder all the way to his lower back, almost splitting his entire back open. This was the knife I blocked for His Majesty back then. He seemed to notice my gaze and explained calmly, as if speaking of something unrelated to himself. The injury on my legs was also from that time. I walked to the edge of the pool, slowly sat down, and dipped my feet into the spring water. The warm spring water enveloped my skin, dispelling the chill of late autumn. Rumors all say that the prince cannot walk properly because of this. I asked cautiously. He smiled self-deprecatingly. Being unable to walk allows me to stay away from the court. From all that right and wrong, doesn't it? Sometimes showing weakness is the best camouflage, I understood, so he usually appeared in a wheelchair. Not because he couldn't walk, but as a strategy of keeping a low profile. This war god prince was far more clear-headed and wise than anyone could imagine in the misty steam. For the first time, we chatted about each other's past like an ordinary couple. He told me about the bloodshed and heroism on the battlefield. I told him about the encounters and hardships in a military household. Before I knew it, I had told him everything about how Xiao Wenyuan had pursued me back then, and how things between us had come to this point step by step after I finished speaking. I suddenly realized I had said too much, and looked at him somewhat uneasily. But he just listened quietly, without interrupting or commenting. When I finished, he finally spoke slowly. He is not a good match. Your brilliance should not be hidden for a man like that. His words were simple and direct, yet struck right at my heart. I looked at the hideous old scar on his back, and as if possessed, I reached out my hand, from the medicine box by the pool. I took out some of the bone-mending ointment he had given me before, and gently applied it to that scar. This ointment works on old wounds, too, I said softly. My fingertips touched his warm skin, and his body visibly stiffened. I could feel the muscles beneath his calm exterior tense up instantly. The atmosphere became somewhat subtle at this moment. The steam blurred his face, and I couldn't see his expression clearly, only those eyes of his that were deeper than the stars, staring at me without moving. After a long while, he reached out and held the hand I was using to apply medicine for him. His palm was broad and warm, hot, with thick calluses left from years of wielding weapons, yet possessing a reassuring strength. Luo Ningxuang. He looked at me, his voice low and serious, each word striking my heart. Stay by this king's side. No one will ever be able to harm you again. This wasn't a romantic declaration yet. It moved me more than any sweet words ever could. I looked at him, at that clear reflection in his eyes, and slowly nodded. In that moment, I knew. My heart, long frozen and dead, seemed to show a hint of thawing. The emperor's thunderous wrath came faster and more violently than I had imagined. The next day, soldiers from the Imperial Guard and the Court of Judicial Review surged like a tide. They flooded toward the Duke of Dingguo's residence, surrounding the entire manor so tightly, not even water could leak through. All evidence during the house raid was counted and sealed one by one. The once glorious gates that had seen endless streams of carriages and horses became the biggest joke in the capital overnight. Duke of Dingguo Xiao Wenyuan and all the core members of the Xiao family's faction were thrown into the imperial prison. 3 days later, in the imperial court, the final trial that would determine the fate of the Duke of Dingguo's household officially began that day. I stood among the ranks of officials alongside Yi Jin in my capacity as Princess Consort of Jing. I witnessed this trial with my own eyes. When Duke of Dingguo and Xiao Wenyuan were escorted into the hall, they had long lost their former prestige. They wore prison clothes with disheveled hair, their faces full of despair and deathly stillness. Witnesses and evidence were presented one by one. Meng Siyuan, as the first witness, spoke passionately, exposing to the public how the Shao family had forged accounts and framed loyal officials back then. The original ledger he produced, sealed away for 10 years, along with the old Duke of Dingguo's handwritten letter, became irrefutable ironclad evidence. Subsequently, the Deputy General of Tongzhou Guard, the messenger from Yanmen Pass, and even some officials bribed by the Shao family all chose to turn against them in the face of irrefutable evidence. They confessed everything about the Shao family's crimes of colluding with foreign enemies and selling military weapons illegally. The evidence piled up like a mountain, each piece enough to doom the Shao family beyond redemption. On the dragon throne, Emperor Yijiao's face was so gloomy it could drip water. He looked at Duke Dingguo and Xiao Wenyuan kneeling before the hall, his eyes filled with disappointment and fury. "Minister Xiao," the emperor's voice was ice-cold without a trace of warmth, "your Shao family has enjoyed imperial favor for 3 generations of nobility. I ask myself, I have treated you well. Is this how you repay me? Repay the great empire?" The old Duke Dingguo collapsed limply to the ground, tears streaming down his aged face, unable to utter a single word. But Xiao Wenyuan suddenly raised his head at this moment. Those eyes that were once gentle and affectionate were now bloodshot, like a cornered beast driven to desperation, staring fixedly at me. That gaze held no remorse, no guilt, only overwhelming resentment. "Your Majesty, this subject has something to say," he shouted hoarsely. "All of this is false accusation. All of it is a trap. It is her. It is that venomous woman Luo Ningxuang who joined hands with Prince Jing to set up this trap to get revenge on this subject." He pushed all the blame onto me, as if he were the innocent victim. The gazes of all the court officials instantly focused on me. I stood beside Yi Jin, my expression without a single ripple. I didn't even glance at him from the corner of my eye, as if he were just a clown performing his last pathetic one-man show. Xiao Wenyuan. The emperor roared angrily, slamming a memorial harshly onto his face. "Even now, you still want to make excuses. Look at what this is." Xiao Wenyuan's hands trembled. He picked up the memorial, which was clearly the intimate love letter he had written to Zhou Wanqing. In the letter, he not only expressed his love for Zhou Wanqing, but also described me as a stumbling block hindering their happiness, and hinted that as long as I was eliminated, he could inherit the heir's position and make her the future duchess. And at the end of the letter, he even mentioned with smug satisfaction, "The assassination attempt at the palace banquet was heaven sent, and I also enabled him to achieve his wishes. As a matter of course, this was the last straw that broke him." He looked at that familiar handwriting and completely fell apart. Luo Ningxuang, she struggled like a madwoman trying to lunge at me, her eyes filled with unconcealed killing intent. "It is all you who did this to me. Where exactly did I wrong you?" Jin Wuwei's steel blade pressed against his neck, stopping his crazed actions. He was pinned firmly to the ground, yet still glared at me with those bloodshot eyes, letting out beast-like howls. "Where did I wrong you?" I finally spoke, my voice not loud, yet it echoed clearly through the solemn and dignified hall of supreme harmony. I slowly, step by step, walked up to him, looking down at him from above. Looking at this man I once loved and once hated, now lying at my feet like a dead dog. My gaze was as calm as stagnant water. "Xiao Wenyuan, you haven't wronged me," I said softly. "You just deserve to die." After saying that, I didn't spare him another glance, turning back to Yi Jin's side. My calmness, my indifference was more despairing to him than any vicious curse. Watching my resolute retreating figure, he finally let out a hysterical roar filled with unwillingness and despair, the sound echoing for a long time among the carved beams and painted rafters of the Daye Hall. The verdict of the trial was without any suspense. The Duke Dingguo's manor was sentenced to execution of the entire family for treason and rebellion, with all assets confiscated. Xiao Wenyuan, as the principal offender, received an aggravated sentence, death by lingering slicing, to be carried out 3 days later outside the Meridian Gate. Those accomplices who had colluded with the Xiao family were also purged one by one, some beheaded, some exiled, cleansing the court entirely. As for Zhou Wanqing, because she carried the last bloodline of the Shao family, and she was genuinely ignorant of the Shao family's crimes, the emperor showed mercy beyond the law and spared her from death. However, she was stripped of her status and reduced to a commoner, and her son would never be recorded in the imperial genealogy. Mother and son were sentenced to exile 3,000 li away to the miasma-plagued lands, forbidden to return to the capital for life. A prestigious noble family that had flourished for 100 years collapsed in just a few days, reduced to dust. The day before the execution, news came from the imperial prison that Xiao Wenyuan requested to see me one last time before his death. When Baiji told me the news, I was playing Go with Yi Jin in the warm pavilion. Holding the black stones, I pondered for a while, then gently placed one down, blocking the large dragon formed by his white stones. "Don't see him," I said lightly, as if speaking of something trivial. Yi Jin looked up at me. "If you want to go, this prince can accompany you." I shook my head and smiled. What is the point of seeing a dying man, listening to his final words of either repentance or curses? To me, he has long been no different from a pebble by the roadside. I don't want his filthy blood to stain the new path I'm about to embark on. My game is already finished. His life or death has nothing to do with me anymore. Yi Jin looked at me. A flash of admiration and heartache passed through his eyes. He reached out, holding my hand that held the chess piece, and said softly, "All right, then we won't see him." In the end, Yi Jin went to the imperial prison on my behalf. When he returned, I was pruning a pot of rare flowers he had brought back from the western regions a few days ago. The flowers were in full bloom, their petals an unusual ink-black color, carrying a mysterious and coldly elegant beauty. What did he say? I didn't turn around, just focused on trimming an extra branch. He was filled with regret until his death. Yi Jin's voice came from behind me. My pruning motion paused for a moment. I heard him continue, "But he didn't regret harming you. He regretted not killing you with a single sword strike at the palace banquet back then to eliminate future troubles." Hearing these words, the last ripple in my heart finally settled completely. I had expected this. This was the real him, Xiao Wenyuan, refined, selfish, and vicious to the bone, until the very last moment of his life. All he thought about was what would benefit him most. I turned around and gave Yi Jin a faint smile. That smile came from the heart, without a trace of gloom. Now I could rest easy. When I said I could rest easy, I meant my choice was correct. I could rest easy knowing I hadn't wasted even the slightest bit of emotion on such a man. The next day, Xiao Wenyuan was escorted to the execution ground. They say that day, the entire capital's citizens came to watch. He was bound to the execution rack, still searching the crowd with venomous eyes. It seemed he was still expecting me to appear, but unfortunately, he never got to see me again until his death. That day, the weather was excellent. Yi Jin took me horseback riding to the western hills in the outskirts. We stood at the mountain peak, overlooking the prosperity of the entire capital. From the direction of the Meridian Gate in the distance came a faint commotion, but it was quickly dispersed by the wind. Yi Jin gently embraced me from behind. "It is all over now," he whispered in my ear. It is all over now." I leaned against his chest, feeling the warmth and strength of his embrace. Yes, it was all over. The Luo Ningxuang who once threw herself into love recklessly, the Luo Ningxuang who nearly died from betrayal, the Luo Ningxuang who plotted every step in hatred, they were all buried along with Xiao Wenyuan's death. The one standing here now is a brand new Luo Ningxuang, living only for herself and for the person beside her. The dust has settled. A new path lies ahead. The downfall of the Xiao family didn't cause much of a stir in the capital. In the court, new people quickly filled the power vacuum. The common folks' lives continued day after day, as if that once illustrious Duke Dingguo's mansion was nothing but a tiny ripple in the river of history, vanishing in an instant. My life also returned to an unprecedented peace and tranquility, without the shackles of hatred. My whole being became lighter. I began spending more time on things I truly enjoyed in the morning. I would practice swordsmanship with Yi Jin at the training grounds. His moves were bold and sweeping, full of battlefield dominance. My swordsmanship was agile and graceful, revealing mastery in the subtleties. One of us firm, one of us supple, we complemented each other perfectly. In the afternoon, I would study military texts with him in the study, discussing world affairs. He possessed talents to govern heaven and earth, while I had my own unique insights on troop formations and battle tactics. We would often argue until our faces turned red over a tactical layout, only to share a knowing smile the next moment when we reached a common understanding. We were like kindred spirits, comrades in arms, and most of all, soulmates who understood each other better than anyone in this world. The servants in the mansion all said that the prince had changed. He was no longer that king of hell who kept a cold face all day and pushed everyone away. A smile began to appear on his face. Warmth began to fill his eyes. And I knew I had changed too. I was no longer that woman who confined herself to the inner courtyard, washing hands to prepare meals for a man. I could don riding attire and draw a strong bow, or I could change into court robes and enter the palace with Yi Jin, offering strategies for the emperor's northern frontier policies in the imperial study. Emperor Yi Zhao's reaction to my transformation also shifted from initial surprise to current admiration and reliance. He even said to Yi Jin half-jokingly, "Imperial uncle, you didn't just marry a princess consort, you clearly found another female general capable of riding into battle to stabilize the nation for my great cause." Such days were fulfilling and free, something I had never dared to hope for. Before I knew it, spring had passed and autumn arrived. Urgent war reports from the northern frontier were suddenly delivered to the capital. The Ruran tribes entrenched at the border had seized the opportunity during the Great Yi Court's turmoil to suddenly tear up the peace agreement and launch a massive southward invasion. They broke through 3 cities in succession, their forces pointing straight at Yanmen Pass. The defending general at Yanmen Pass was none other than Meng Siyuan, who had been reinstated after being implicated in the Shao family case years ago. Though he resisted with all his might, the Ruran attack was fierce, and the disparity in forces was great. For a moment, the battle situation was precarious. When the news arrived, the court was shaken. In the imperial study, Emperor Yi Zhao was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. "Imperial uncle, what should we do now?" He cast his pleading gaze toward Yi Jin. Yi Jin looked at Yanmen Pass on the map, precarious as eggs stacked high, his brows tightly furrowed. "Your Majesty, the Ruran have come prepared this time. General Meng cannot hold alone. I request an imperial decree to personally lead troops to the northern border to oversee the battle." "Absolutely not." The emperor immediately refused. "Royal uncle, your leg." "It is fine." Yi Jin interrupted him. His gaze was as resolute as iron. "When the nation faces peril, it is my duty without question." I looked at him, at that familiar glow of a war god in his eyes, and made a decision in my heart. I stepped forward, knelt on one knee before the emperor, my voice clear and resolute. "Your Majesty, I request an imperial decree to accompany the prince to the northern border." The entire court was shocked. "Ning Shuang, what nonsense are you up to?" Yi Jin was the first to object, his tone filled with undisguised worry. "Your Highness." I raised my head to meet his gaze, without the slightest retreat. "I am not being reckless. I am the descendant of a military family, well versed in the art of war since childhood. I am skilled in riding and archery, and I know the terrain of the northern border better than any civil official in the court. More importantly, General Meng served under my late father. Most soldiers in the army are disciples of the Luo family army. If I go with you, I can surely stabilize morale and lend the prince a helping hand." My words were powerful and well-reasoned, leaving everyone present unable to refute. Emperor Yi Zhao looked at me, then glanced at Yi Jin. Finally, he let out a long sigh and nodded heavily approved. "I hereby command Prince Jing Yi Jin as Grand Marshal of the Army and Princess Consort Jing Luo Ningxuang as Military Supervisor. Immediately lead Yaolinin Lingninning troops to reinforce Yanmen Pass." 3 days later, the army set out. I took off my elaborate work attire and changed into a suit of silver armor, the one my father had personally crafted for me years ago. It had always been treasured at the bottom of my chest. Now it finally saw the light of day again. Jin and I stood side by side on the High Commander's platform, receiving the salute of the 100,000 soldiers. At that moment, I saw something unprecedented in Jin's eyes. A dazzling, brilliant light. Ningxuang. He turned to look at me, his voice carrying a hint of emotion. "This is the real you," I smiled, meeting his burning gaze. That smile was bright and radiant, as if it had dispelled all the gloom of the past. "No," I answered him with a smile. "It is only when I'm with you that I dare to be the real me." The sound of horns pierced through the sky, and we spurred our horses forward, racing toward that vast battlefield that belonged to us. Behind us lay the prosperity of the capital in the past. Ahead stretched the endless grasslands and a brand new future. My new life had only just begun. The wind in the northern frontier is different from that in the capital. It carries not a trace of rouge, none of that carefully calculated fragrance from the imperial garden. Only pure, biting freedom mixed with the scent of grass and earth. It scrapes across my cheeks like coarse sandpaper, yet it makes me feel more clear-headed than ever before. It has been over a month since I arrived at Yanmen Pass with the army. I shed the princess consort's elaborate robes and changed into leather armor, no different from that of ordinary soldiers. That soft sword engraved with the character Jin now coils around my waist, the warmth of its hilt seeming to reach my skin through layers of clothing and armor. My dwelling is no longer the eastern courtyard with its carved beams and painted rafters, but a simple military tent outside of which stretches an endless expanse of vast grassland and rolling encampments. This life is harsh, yet I savor it. I no longer need to play anyone's role. Here I am not someone's ex-wife, not someone's princess consort. I am simply Luo Ningxuang, the military supervisor of the great Yi dynasty. My worth depends on my judgment of the battlefield, on how heavy a bow I can draw, on whether I can find the enemy's weakness for Yi Jin amid the ever-changing sand table simulations. Yi Jin, he seems born to belong here. Back in the capital, he was a lion trapped in a wheelchair. Even with his imposing presence, there was always a hint of suppressed melancholy about him, and upon reaching this vast world, he was like a dragon entering the sea, a fierce tiger returning to the mountains. He stood on the commander's platform, his voice carrying across the three armies. He galloped on horseback before the formations, his figure even more agile than the eagles of the northern frontier. The old wound on his leg seemed to matter less amidst this iron-blooded, battle-ready atmosphere. The daily war councils were when I was most engaged. Inside the tent, a group of bearded, dark-skinned, fierce generals gathered around a massive sand table, arguing endlessly. At first, they all looked at me, this female military supervisor who had suddenly appeared with a hint of dismissiveness in their eyes. They probably thought I was just a delicate ornamental vase sent by the emperor to gild my reputation, a burden brought along by His Highness, the Prince of Jing. I didn't argue with them, only listened quietly, watched quietly, until one time when they were locked in heated debate over the movements of a Ruran cavalry unit, and even Yi Jin was frowning in deep thought. Only then did I slowly speak up. The Ruran appeared to be breaking through from the Gourd Pass on the west side, but I believe this is a feint. I pointed at an inconspicuous small valley on the sand table. Their real target is here. This place is called Yixiantian. The terrain is treacherous, easy to defend, and hard to attack, and our defenses there are lax. If I were the Ruran commander, I would certainly send an elite force to infiltrate through here under cover of night and directly destroy our grain supply camp. Once the supplies are lost, our 100,000 troops would fall into chaos without even fighting. The moment my words fell, the tent went dead silent, and everyone looked at me as if they'd seen a ghost. A general with a full beard couldn't help but sneer. "Princess Consort, have you been reading too many storybooks? A place like One-Line Sky, even goats can't climb up there. How could a cavalry unit possibly pass through?" I ignored him and just looked at Yi Jin. Yi Jin gave me a deep look. He didn't question it, nor did he hesitate. He simply ordered in a low voice, passed down the order, dispatch 3,000 elite soldiers from the Shent's battalion to One Line Sky immediately to set up an ambush. Zhou Yong, you'll lead the team personally. Your Highness, the bearded general wanted to persuade him further. Execute the military order. Yi Jin's voice wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that couldn't be defied. That night, the Roran's ace unit, the Grey Wolf Swiss, just as I had predicted, attempted to launch a sneak attack through One Line Sky. Instead, they walked right into the inescapable trap. The Shent's battalion had already set and were nearly annihilated. After this battle, no one in the army dared to look down on me anymore. Those generals who once looked at me with contempt would now respectfully clasp their fists and address me as supervisor. I saw genuine respect in their eyes. This respect had nothing to do with my status, my appearance, or who my husband was. It came solely from my ability. This feeling made my heart surge more than any sweet words Xiao Wenyuan ever said back then. That afternoon, a messenger came from the capital, bringing a letter from my father. Besides reporting that all was well and mentioning the situation at court, it also briefly mentioned a trivial matter. Father wrote that Zhou Wangqing, who had been exiled, had taken her young son to that miasma-ridden land. Unable to adapt to the climate, the child cried day and night, looking gaunt and haggard, truly pitiful. Old acquaintances in the capital who heard of this sighed, saying she was but a lonely woman who had encountered the wrong person. Having been dragged down to this state by Xiao Wenyuan, her fate was truly bitter. Looking at those lines, my hand holding the letter paused slightly. Zhou Wanqing, I hadn't thought of that name in a long time. That woman who always looked so frail and pitiable, that woman who hid behind Xiao Wenyuan clutching her belly, watching me collapse in a pool of blood with the eyes of a victor bitter fate dragged down. If the old me had heard such words, perhaps my heart would still have stirred with complicated feelings. Would I have thought she deserved it, or would I have thought she was ultimately just another pitiful soul? But now, looking at the vast grassland outside the window, my heart is surprisingly calm, without even a single ripple. I just find it somewhat laughable. Is she really innocent? She knew full well about Xiao Wenyuan's coldness and scheming toward me, yet she enjoyed his special treatment with a clear conscience. She knew that so-called deep bond between uncle and sister-in-law went against human ethics. Yet she never thought to avoid suspicion, instead reveling in it. At the palace banquet, she watched with her own eyes as I was pushed out to take the arrow. Did she ever feel even a bit of guilt? No, she and I are the same. We were both making choices. I chose to endure for love and nearly lost my life in the end. She chose to cling to a selfish man, enjoying the glory that came from stepping on me. So when this man falls from power, what is there to sympathize with when she, as a beneficiary, gets swept up in the reckoning? Fate gives everyone the right to choose, and inevitably makes everyone bear the consequences of their choices. Her suffering is her own choice, and has nothing to do with anyone else. I was lost in thought when Yi Jin walked into the tent at some point. Seeing the letter in my hand and the contemplative expression on my face, he didn't pry about its contents like most men would. He simply sat down across from me, poured himself a cup of hot tea, and asked calmly, "Is the letter from the capital troubling you?" His tone wasn't probing or interrogating, but rather an equal inquiry filled with concern. I shook my head and handed him the letter from his father. We talked about some old matters from the capital. Yi Jin took it, his gaze sweeping over the passage describing Zhou Wangqing, his eyebrows slightly raised. Then he looked at me, his eyes sharp and direct. "Does this matter still disturb your peace of mind?" I met his gaze. With a calm smile, I said, "It doesn't disturb me. I was just thinking perhaps the most important thing in one's life is not what one encounters, but what one chooses." I paused, then continued before. "I thought marrying a man meant a lifetime's belonging, so my world was only a small rear courtyard. Now I know the world is vast, far beyond what a single manor can confine. Zhou Wangqing chose her courtyard and her man. I chose my battlefield and my principles. We each got what we sought. There is nothing more to say." Yi Jin listened quietly. In those deep eyes gradually appeared a hint of gentle amusement. He reached out, placing his hand over mine on the table, gently holding it. "You're right." His voice was low and warm. "Your battlefield is here, and your belonging is here too." He didn't say "with me," but said "here." I understood what he meant. What he gave me was not a belonging where I needed his protection, but a battlefield where I could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. This was the greatest difference between Xiao Wenyuan and Yejin. Xiao Wenyuan wanted to turn me into a canary he liked, while Yejin only wanted me to be the eagle that always belonged to the sky. That night, the Raran launched their largest-scale night raid. A shrill horn pierced the tranquil night sky. Countless torches lit up from all directions, rushing toward our camp like ghostly flames. The battle cries and neighing of war horses were deafening. Yijin and I rushed out of the tent almost simultaneously. Orders to form the Black Tortoise formation as drilled during the day to defend against enemies, and for archers to prepare for night combat, spread calmly and clearly throughout the entire camp. I didn't stay in the central command tent. Instead, I drew my flexible sword and stood shoulder to shoulder with him at the front of the formation. Amidst the chaos, an elite Raran squad actually broke through our left flank defense. They charged straight towards our central command post like a sharp knife. The leading general wielded a curved saber, his face ferocious, targeting Yijin directly. In that instant, time seemed to flow backward. The same life-or-death crisis, the same blade hurtling toward us, my heart clenched tight. Yet this time, the man beside me didn't push me away. Yijin's reaction was lightning fast. Almost instinctively, he sidestepped, shielding me behind him. At the same time, the longsword in his hand had already left its sheath, meeting that deadly curved saber. Clang the clash of metal rang piercingly loud. But at the very moment he protected me from another direction. A Ruran soldier had also broken through, his spear thrusting like a venomous snake toward Yijin's completely unguarded back. "Watch out!" I shouted sharply. As Yijin shielded me, I also moved. Without the slightest hesitation, the flexible sword in my hand struck like a serpent emerging from its hole, precisely deflecting that spear. Blades crossed, sparks flew everywhere. Yijin and I stood back to back, entrusting our rears to each other. He blocked the blade in front of me. I deflected the spear behind him. We exchanged a smile that spoke of wordless understanding, of trust that transcends life and death in that moment. The last trace of shadow in my heart completely dissipated. The scar Xiao Wenyuan left me was not only on my shoulder, but also in my heart. He made me fearful, made me stop trusting anyone. I was afraid of being the one abandoned again at a critical moment. But tonight, Yijin completely healed me with his actions. He made me understand that true love isn't about how many sweet words you say in times of comfort, but about instinctively shielding someone behind you in times of danger. And true strength isn't about facing all storms alone, but about having someone you can trust enough to give them your back. That night raid ultimately ended in a resounding victory for our army. By dawn, both Yijin and I had some minor wounds that were nothing serious. We sat in the tent, bandaging each other's wounds. When he cleaned the cut on my arm with strong liquor, his movements were clumsy yet extremely careful, afraid of hurting me. I looked at his focused profile and couldn't help but smile. "Your Highness," I said softly, "I feel that the word home has a new meaning for me now." He raised his head, a questioning look in his eyes before. I thought home was that magnificent mansion in the capital, the stability of supporting my husband and raising children. But now I feel home is this simple tent, this biting north wind, this perilous battlefield. As long as you're here, as long as we can stand side by side, anywhere is home. Yijin held my hand and didn't speak for a long time. After a while, he leaned down and pressed a gentle yet solemn kiss on my forehead. I took out my father's letter from my chest. I didn't read it again, just threw it into the warm charcoal fire before me. The letter curled and blackened in the flames, finally turning into a wisp of smoke, dissipating in the faint light of the northern frontier's morning, along with all those unbearable memories of the past, vanishing into ashes. I looked up at a brand new red sun outside the tent. It was bursting forth from the vast horizon, its rays warm and dazzling, illuminating the entire grassland, and also illuminating the rest of my life.